Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm the Israeli in the group, Hemi Zucker. And today, when I say we have to be careful. I'm like the little mice going with the big elephants and say we are making a lot of dust when we go through the forest. So we have here Doug from Oracle and Chuck from Cisco. And I'm the CEO of J2 Global, a local company here in Los Angeles. And we'll try to take your questions. We were supposed to be 4 of us, so we have more time than we originally planned. And we go through the M&A. I'll start with saying that my job is running the company, but the part that I really like is the M&A. There is a lot of drama there. There is a lot of passion there, and it's an interesting part of my job. I think that you, Doug, do it most of your time. All of your time, so you have a lot of fun, and you're doing it when you need it. So how about we start with you, Doug? Talk about yourself.
Okay. Again, my name is Doug Caring. So I run the corporate development group here at Oracle, and corporate development includes all of our inorganic activities. So anytime that we'd like to do something strategic in which we spend money, it comes through my organization. I have about 16 people on my team, and we've done about 87 acquisitions or so since we acquired PeopleSoft, which was our largest transaction in early 2005, and really started our acquisition strategy at that point in time. And I brought a couple of quick slides just to tell a little bit about us. Not that no one knows about Oracle or Cisco, but our strategy has been very succinct for a long period of time. It's to have a complete stack of technologies, and as well as a model in which you can do lots of different things, whether it's on premise or in the cloud. And part of the whole idea behind acquisitions is to help fulfill that strategy. And so you can see here, although it's very small font, a series of different transactions that have occurred at Oracle in which they've helped fulfill a strategy. So I've been here at Oracle for 12 years and have run the corporate development group since 2005.
Thank you. And you?
Okay, I'm Charles Stuckey. I go by Chuck. I've been at Cisco for also 12 years, and I run a business unit there. And the business unit I run is in the IP video space. I provide technology to service providers to run their entertainment systems. I'm here because Cisco has made more acquisitions in Israel than any other country outside the United States, and same is true on investment. So we've made 9 acquisitions that were headquartered in Israel. You can see the names there. Some of the more recent ones were in the areas of security and file management, service delivery platforms, network management. But we recently announced, it's not closed yet, that we are buying NDS, which is part of the business that I run, which is in the service provider video. And it was founded in Israel, has 1,200 engineers still there, mostly in Jerusalem. And so we will have an ever larger presence in Israel. And we tend to make acquisitions where we've made acquisitions, where we have strength, we tend to add to that strength. So Israel, for us, is basically an extension of Silicon Valley. We make acquisitions there in core tech for global markets, not to enter Israel like we might make investments in Russia to enter Russia, or in Africa to enter Africa, but we buy companies in Israel as part of our core platform for global markets. We also made we've made 21 direct investments to be precise. Almost all of them have worked. Some are still in process. Some have been acquired, some of them by us. Riverhead is an example that we ended up buying. Actona, same thing. So that's why I came today, to talk hopefully a little bit about what do we look for, what are we looking for next that might be very specific to Israel.
So I'm Hemi Zucker, a smaller company, so I'll spend some time talking about it. I'm sure that everybody here knows who is Oracle or Cisco. Next slide. So we are a growth company. We are growing for the last 16 years. I joined the company early on. We are very profitable. As you can see, 46% non-GAAP operating margins. We are very efficient. We take pride in the fact that we generate $550,000 for employee. We are a subscription-based company with 2 million paying customers and 12 million free ones. We are in many countries, many languages, and today I'm here because we are very acquisitive. We actually bought 38 companies, 4 of them this year. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll explain you. All this background is given to you, so later on if we go to some questions. We are known for our brand eFax, which actually is an acquisition of us. I will talk about it a bit later. We have DIDs, phone numbers. We have phone numbers in 4,000 plus cities, 49 countries. We have eVoice and OneBox, which are similar products, unified messaging. And then we expanded beyond our comfort zone, which was telephony, into email in the cloud, backup in the cloud, and CRM in the cloud. Basically, we are a cloud provider for businesses. We have done 38 acquisitions, and when we buy companies, we are focusing on roll-ups, meaning companies that compete with us, and we are trying to add them to our portfolio. We do acquisitions that are based on geography, so we want to cover another country. That's another, I'm sure that both Chuck and not so much about Oracle, but geography is very important because we are providing local service. We also buy technology, patents, and we expand our cloud services, so we get into new technologies. We'll talk about that. And the last slide that I have today is our acquisition slide, which you can see we have done many of them and trying to accelerate it. We believe it's a good use for a good process for our shareholders. With that said, I'll ask Doug to talk about the market trends and what are the trends in the market that you are particularly interested in when you are looking into acquisitions.
Yeah, so at Oracle, we've done three things in Israel. So we haven't been as active. We bought a company called Convergent 2 years ago. We bought a company called Demantra that was probably 5 years ago now, and Demantra was based in the U.S. but had its roots and its R&D effort in Israel. And then we took an investment in Mellanox, a fairly large public company in Israel, about a year and a half ago. So our strategy is really to find the best technologies regardless of where they're located. So we don't specifically say, gee, I'd like to buy something in France today and in Israel next week, but more saying what is the issue that we're trying to fulfill and where is the technology. So in part all of our trends or our relationships are with our engineering teams and that's where we love to be a help with Israeli companies who'd like to create partnerships and business development opportunities with our engineering teams, because that obviously is where you get exposed and where those opportunities may come to be, whether it's just a business development relationship or potentially an acquisition over time. Clearly, given the breadth of things that we do in the enterprise space, it could be anything from a security opportunity to an infrastructure opportunity to a software as a service application. So there's no certain trend that I'm sitting there saying, gee, these are the 3 things that we'll do, as opposed to we have 29,000 engineers. What are the types of things that would help them to fulfill their customer mission? And let's go look at the different companies that would fulfill that, and if those are based in Israel or if those based in the U.S., we'll go meet with them and then and see if we can make something work.
Chuck, I will ask you the same question. What are you looking for in the market trends, and what are you out for?
Yeah, so the space, Cisco, of course, is invested in core networking, in collaboration, and then in video as big priorities, and I come from the video area. And as I said, what we tend to buy is core tech. So the way that we end up buying companies in Israel or companies that are in core tech is that they've got an insight into where the technology is going, and they build something that's actually quite sophisticated. So you talked about security, and in fact, NDS was around content security. And we've bought other companies in security. It could be in video or packet processing. It could be in service delivery platforms, which are certainly going to continue to be relevant as service providers roll out all kinds of services. And so we're looking for companies who sort of independently, they certainly watch what we're doing and what we're saying about the future of television, of how media is going to be delivered across multiple channels, multiple devices, how time shifting is essentially pervasive, place shifting, and to get their own insights into where those markets may be going, all the way, again, from the semiconductor up through the middleware, security, content security, even how things are delivered across managed and unmanaged wired and wireless networks. And what you can do and what entrepreneurs do is basically get ahead of where we're going, and we end up buying them to bring in talent to accelerate our roadmap for markets that we're already in. So I think certainly around video, you would look at what Cisco and other leaders in the market are doing and think in particular areas where can you pick up on a new trend that might be coming from what media companies are doing that service providers will have to adapt to later, as an example. Or what are users doing with their multiple devices over increasingly high-speed wireless networks, and what that might mean for software for security. And those will be the areas that I expect that we'll be investing in. Now, on top of that, there are things we haven't thought of, whole new markets that are outside of the things I talked about. And in the future, we may add a whole other category, but I don't know what that is. Beyond collaboration and video. So there's always, raw innovation is always welcome too.
Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes. Many people here, I'm sure, either acquired a company, been acquired, or want to be acquired, or want to buy a company. And there is a process. I think that M&A is, when I try to describe it to a novice, I'd say it's almost like marriage. You need to decide what you're looking for, what market, what geography, whatever. See the parents and then there is the courting process. When you get your candidates, when you get close to you or they get close to you. Then there is the LOI, kind of similar to an engagement. Public companies have also issues about disclosure, so they have to hide it, keep it. It's like cheating in marriage, you have to deny it if they catch you. Say, I heard that you are buying this company. Full denial. No, deny the rumor. And then when you do the deal, you have the entrepreneurs or the owners of the company, you do something that has a holdback similar to a prenup, which is legal in Los Angeles, California. But really, it's all about hard work, and I'd like to ask you, Doug, you have a team of people. How do you do it? Tell us the secrets behind get us into your kitchen.
Well, I always like to boil it down. If you're the acquirer versus the seller, it's a different equation. But as an acquirer, we always boil it down to 4 simple things, which I'm going to say them, and you're going to be like, duh. But the problem is the execution of them are very difficult. The first is to do acquisitions that only fulfill your strategy, and it's amazing how many times people do things because they're looking for new growth opportunities, or they're looking to expand into new markets, and because they want a diversification. Anything that gets away from your core strategy means you lose synergies. You don't actually make 1 + 1 mean something more, and as a result, it's hard to make those transactions successful. So I think the first thing is make sure it's part of your strategy, and don't do things for the wrong idea.
Yes.
The second thing is to pay the right prices. I think that's again, especially in today's marketplace, we're seeing a lot of evaluation discourse where folks are overpaying for assets, and when you overpay for assets, there's no way you'll get a shareholder return, and that's why you do acquisitions. They have to be to generate a shareholder return. So being disciplined on pricing is important. The third is generating synergies. So making sure that you have a good integration strategy, you execute it flawlessly, and help make sure that you don't just integrate, but you eliminate, i.e. you do find ways to get synergies from a cost standpoint as well as a revenue. And then finally, repeat. And you say whether you're small J2 and you do 38 deals, or you're Cisco and you're doing however many, or Oracle, repetition is important because you get people who keep doing the same thing and they do best practices and learn how to do it better.
And you Chuck. How do you do it? I know that you are running a big business, but you're also very acquisitive. What is your process? Where are the leads coming from? A company approaching you, or you have your marketing guy say, gee, this company is competing with us. They are, like in our case, sometimes companies start to be very aggressive on our keywords in Google, and they get our attention. And then we say, oh, maybe they are big, maybe they are. How do you do it in a large company in your space?
Well, you saw on that slide we had sort of the three categories of where we're going after our core areas, and I should have mentioned data center is the fourth area that we've made a lot of investments in lately. So we have our corporate development teams very similar, who are looking at working with the business units like mine, looking at where are there companies who are out ahead of us and we can fill a gap. We also make investments in things that we would say are pre-chasm. So we think they're coming into our space, but we're not sure, so we'll make investments. That was the 21. And then we don't do this in Israel anymore. In Israel, we stopped there. We no longer do venture capital investing, but in other markets, we then also participate at even a smaller level with firms that we choose to put money in, so that we basically have a funnel of companies that we're looking at. And that's the corporate development group does that. And of course, the business units run into, I'm partnering with and investing in a number of companies in my space, and I am in the space that I work in, that today show up as partners, but they're part of my whole offer. They easily could become part of what I have. So I think in terms of if you're positioning a company, I think what we look for is where you have technology that applies to the global market, and what you could benefit from most is all of the customers that we can bring. So, Cisco, half of Cisco is sales and marketing. And so if you have a technology you've proven with a lead customer or with a handful of customers, and that technology works, what we can do is take it to a massive scale. What we tend to buy less of, and certainly almost none of in Israel, is a company that's focused on marketing or on consumer experience, purely on consumer experiences, right? That's best done in Silicon Valley, or if it's media, it's best done here or in New York City. But where we can add the marketing sizzle and the sales force penetration, if you've got a technology that applies deep in the security area, or deep in the data center, or deep inside of video packet processing, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. And do you have in Oracle and or in Cisco dedicated teams that once you do an acquisition, they do the integration? Like we are a small company, so the integration is done by the unit that is more relevant to, but I know that some big companies have different focus. They have people that all they do all day long is they bring in, they onboard them, and they move on to the next one. How is it going in your company?
Yeah, so let me answer that as well as give maybe a piece of advice for folks, and Chuck can say whether it applies to Cisco, although my sense is it applies to most big companies, which is when you sell your company to a bigger vendor, you're going to have to follow the processes of the vendor that's buying you. And I think that's important to know and understand, because like at Oracle, we have very large integration teams, and those teams have, because each finance and tax and legal and engineering and sales all have dedicated integration specialists that live inside those functions but are part of our integration team that we help manage. So as a result, they have very rigorous processes that they all follow in order to make for an effective integration. And I always like to give advice from from a seller standpoint. If you're looking to sell to a big company, which is, don't wait until you are ready to sell in order to get your house in order. In fact, when you have a company like us that has gone through 87 acquisitions, we know exactly what to look for. We know exactly where the bones will be buried, and it's a really good idea if you're selling your business to kind of each year kind of go back and look inside your business. Go get your contracts together and with customers, your partners. Look at them and see, have an outside person look at them and say, are we being rigorous about what we're doing? Do we have terms that are kind of outside the bounds that we should try to clean up? It's amazing when you have a very professional integration team, the things that they'll find that you have no idea are happening in your company, and that's not a good time to find out about those things. So it's a good idea to sort of do that work ahead of time. It can benefit your company on its own, and it can only help you then when it comes to the time where you're not trying to sell, but somebody approaches you to buy.
I agree. When you see companies that are organized, it impacts the valuation. So if you're ready to sell, if you're organized, you have your numbers, you have your metrics, you're organized, you are going to get better value, definitely. So for you, Chuck.
Well, I would agree with, we have a very similar process. If I look at acquisitions we're integrating, I also did Tandberg that we bought in Norway. About 2/3 of the personnel are the specialists, and about 1/3 come from product management and from engineering from the business unit that sort of is sponsoring the acquisition or is sponsoring it. But I would say about 99% of the strategic decisions that come up during the integration come from the business. So another thing to do when you're preparing to be acquired is to be clear whose strategy you're aligning with, whose market vision you're aligning with, because that's how you're going to get chosen, is on the alignment of strategy and culture in part. All of what you said about being having your house in order definitely applies. But when you're in the integration and there's a lot of hard work to be done, you know, the more you're aligned with the business leaders that are doing the acquiring, the more the decision will be made that are consistent with what you're trying to accomplish from a business point of view. Because all the other stuff about getting supply chain systems and accounting systems and HR comp plans and all that lined up can all be done, but we want it to be done in the direction where you're trying to take the company. So that's an important element.
Yes. I'm looking for any great story that you think, you know, be either fun or important for the audience. You know, you've done many of them. You know, there are always those special stories. You know, we are a public company, so there's so much you can say, but you had good and best surprises. Can you talk about one of those?
Well, we talked about this before we got in here, and it's. I was told by my PR group I'm not allowed to actually create any waves here, so I have to be very careful. The only thing that I would say that I think a lot of people don't realize is that at Oracle we have a very tight decision-making team, and I think people are very surprised by it. You know, I just mentioned how big our integration teams are, but in reality, the strategic decision-making is around our CEO and our two co-presidents. Outside of that, there's a very small group of folks that are involved, and our CEO Larry Ellison is privy and a part to every acquisition decision, and folks just don't. They often think that it's some big, you know, machine out there that you can't touch or feel, but in reality, it's just a few people. They get involved heavily. They understand and are a participant in that, and that has a huge benefit, not only from an entrepreneur, from the standpoint of being able to understand the strategy and how you'd fit and the alignment, but actually from the opposite, which is it's a great selling point for us, which is you're not going to be buried somewhere within the company. You get very, very high visibility into our company, and it's an important piece of what we're trying to accomplish from an acquisition standpoint, so we want that visibility at the highest levels at Oracle.
And Chuck, I noticed that Chambers is a member of the acquisition committee, which, similar to Oracle, it goes to the top. What do you have, any story that, I know that you did a big acquisition in Israel, NDS recently, any story that is a bit spicy for our audience? I know it's a public company, I know.
No spice, but I do know that the CEO is very involved, and it is exciting. It's an exciting time. So I would say if your company's being acquired, you would want to brace for high drama, for tight deadlines, for middle of the night decisions, and if you're the company being acquired, you need to continue to lead the company through the acquisition and keep the morale up, keep the spirit up, keep the momentum going. That's all I can say.
Hemi, we saved the spice for you. Why don't you give him a spicy story?
All right, so I will, maybe. I don't know if there's 31 seconds here. I don't know if it's relevant or we just. Where's Sharona?
I'm here. I'm counting the seconds.
Sorry, so we have to finish on time? Yeah. Happy ending?
Give your spicy story. You gotta say the spicy story. Come on.
You have another 6 minutes.
All right. Now, so let's do. I'll tell you a story. So we bought a company called eFax. eFax was a competitor of ours, and they were eating our lunch, and they believed in a certain way. They took a loan from us. They couldn't pay it back, and then we gave them some more money, and we ended up buying the company. We gave them some equity, I think like $8 or $9 million. A year later, I was then the CFO. I'm getting a call from a company, and they say, you are an owner in our company. Now, I don't own anything, but, I pretended maybe I got something from my uncle. He said, are you Nehemiah Zucker? I knew now it's official because nobody calls me Nehemiah Zucker. Apparently, they, like 10 or 15 years before we bought them, they gave technology to a company called Oasis something in the semiconductor. To cut a long story short, we got $15 million from this acquisition. They didn't know that they are selling us. We didn't know that we are buying it, so we actually got our largest assets for free, actually. So that's a nice story. All right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Israel. I have to put my glasses again. So what do you think character, I even cannot even say this word, what is typical about the Israeli acquisitions from your view of being Americans? I mean, I'm an ex-Israeli, so I see differently, but what would be your advice or you know, all of us here are interested in keeping jobs in Israel, I think my personal opinion is that too many Israeli companies are rushing for the exit. It's a combination of the will of the founders to make money. Also, I think, as you said, Israel is not very good in doing marketing around the world. But I wish we had in Israel more checkpoints, more Teva, more companies like that. Or NDS, for instance. Israel sold it for 15 million. You bought it for 5 billion. Somebody rushed there. So what do you see that is typical of your Israeli interactions companies? Anything about that, Chuck, and then you, Doug?
Well, I don't think there's anything typical other than when we end up buying have the technical depth that I spoke of, probably enough. The rushing for the exit, I think, is an interesting question because I think Israel's reached the point where you could build your sales and marketing machine somewhere else in New York or in London, but still keep the company headquartered in Israel. It tends to go the other way, that you move the company out of Israel to begin the scaling. I think the way to keep jobs in Israel either way, and this is part of why Cisco's interested in having me here, is because we have critical mass in Israel, we'll have more critical mass in Israel. So we're more likely to keep jobs there than we would have been when we made our first acquisition. So I think that is something to look for when you're evaluating who you might want to be bought by. If in fact you're interested, part of your motivation as jobs in Israel is look through the critical mass and the track record of the company that you're buying, and you should expect to be able to keep technical jobs in Israel and other administrative functions and sales functions where Israel doesn't have a natural advantage. Those jobs probably not.
Yeah, well, for Oracle, what we're buying is technology and the people that built it. So in any case, wherever that technology was built and the people that created it, that's what we're going to keep. So it doesn't, you know, there's no sense in trying to pick up and move an engineering team, things like that. So of course, if we do something local and country, that's the most important thing, is to establish that base, maintain it, and then grow from there and keep the core from that standpoint. The only thing I would say as an adjunct to that is that the intellectual property is the most important. So the question that you should always be asking yourself is, do I have any liens on that intellectual property? Are there things in which it's sort of there's interloping around that intellectual property? And I know when we did one of our transactions in Israel with the development office there and what needed to be done to repay the loans in order to be able to utilize the intellectual property wherever we decided around the world, and that was an interesting discovery on that front. And I'd say that to the extent you're aware and understand that, getting that knowledge base put together to help companies that aren't as familiar with Israel is very helpful. So Oracle had done its first deal there, and we spent an extra month or so just trying to get our heads around what was going on and what it meant. I think it's the chief scientist's office.
Misrad HaMadan, we call it. Misrad HaMadan Rashi.
Okay,
yes.
exactly. And so that would have been helpful if that was available right off the get-go, thinking, gee, nobody understands this if you haven't done a transaction here, and that sort of slowed the process down. That could have been more efficient.
Thank you very much, everybody. Sharona.